The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on July 22nd, 2025.
Welcome to Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. Now here's your host, the president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, Pam Toompop. Good morning, Pam.
Hey, good morning, Gary. How are you this morning?
I am doing well. It's another hot and humid day already.
Well, thankfully, it's still a little cool up in Pukalani.
Mm-hmm. You know, I went up to Kula this past Saturday. I thought, oh, great, it'll be nice and cool. But no, it wasn't.
No, during the day, it's been getting pretty warm up here as well, yeah. But we're grateful. We're very grateful.
It's better than snow.
Although I'd like a little more rain.
Yes.
Well, I just appreciate all you do, Gary. Thank you so much for helping with this show and producing it for us. And we just always love talking to you every Tuesday morning.
Thank you.
It's our great pleasure. Well, welcome everybody to Business Matters. It is going to be a fabulous day. I'm your host, Pamela Toompop, president of the Chamber, and we are going to talk this morning with Senator Troy Hoshimoto, representing District 5, which includes Wailuku, Kahului, Waihe'e, and Waikapu. We'll discuss everything from the Lahaina resettlement progress to the future of Space Force. So get ready. This is going to be a fun discussion this morning. And then we're going to meet Kristen Galapon, co-owner of TNG Consultants, and discuss ways businesses can survive and thrive in these times. So, but let's get started with Senator Troy Hoshimoto. We're honored to have him as a return guest. He has dedicated his career to shaping Hawaii's policies and advocating for his home island of Maui. He is a fifth-generation Maui resident who understands the unique challenges and opportunities facing his community. Holding a bachelor's and an MBA from the University of Denver, Senator Hoshimoto has spent years working on policy and budgetary matters. First as aide to the Maui County Council, and later as a member of the Hawaii State Legislature. Appointed to the State Senate in 2023, he now serves as Assistant Majority Whip and Vice Chair of the Housing Committee, tackling critical issues like housing, affordability, education, and infrastructure. Good morning, Troy. It's so great to have you on Business Matters this morning.
Good morning, Tam. Thanks for having me back, and it's great to be able to talk about some of the issues that we're working at the legislature.
Well, we always love hearing the updates, and even though session is over, I know you're always still working on these issues. And, you know, as I just mentioned, you have been very involved in housing. And, of course, housing has been such a crisis state for Maui, and then, of course, exacerbated by the wildfires. Can you tell us about what's new, what's the latest on housing? And I also want to hear, I know you've been involved in working with the new middle school for Central Maui. So can you tell us about what families can expect to see in terms of progress on both of these fronts?
Absolutely. You know, I think it was another banner year at the legislature for housing. I think we made some very important monetary investments into some of our big housing funds, which is the Rental Housing Revolving Fund that invests in rental projects statewide. I think we also have a secondary fund called the Dwelling Unit Revolving Fund, which invests in infrastructure and more for-sale housing statewide. And so we again made additional investments into those funds of $50 million each. And this is on top of the already over $100 million that we invested the year before. And so the good thing is those funds will be trickling down into our community, and that will be what we will be seeing, actual housing units being developed. I think one of the big new housing developments that I would like to announce that it's a little bit quiet, but I think now we've gotten for sure confirmation from Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation that the Aikanaha project in Waikapu is finally going to get off the ground. It received all the funding that it needed from the state side. The county generously invested from their affordable housing fund into that project. And why that project is so important is because that will satisfy the affordable component for the Waikapu Country Town project that has been going on for years and years and years in the planning phase. And now at least we have that first housing development that will now kick off that broader project. And what that affordable housing component will allow them to do is start developing the rest of the development. So I think that is a very exciting thing. It's about 1,400 units that will come online over the course of the development, and we know it takes a while for that to actually happen, but at least we'll start to see some progress. I think many people were always asking, when is that going to happen? When is that going to happen? And now at least the funding is there, and sometimes the funding is the hardest part to get. And that will open the door to what we then secured next was an additional $35 million for the Central Maui Middle School, which will be in that development. But if we didn't get that housing component, we wouldn't have been able to start building that middle school. So we have all the planning funds for that middle school, and I think that community is going to be ripe for starting, right? And I think that's what we've been all pushing for. I think we have a few more components that need to get done. We need to expand and extend Waiale Road. So that will go right into the development. So as you drive along Waiale Road, it's supposed to go right into Waikapu Country Town. And then, of course, the last component is we are working with the county to build out the future infrastructure of our wastewater treatment plant. And so that will be very important for us to get completed. I think that will also allow us to then recycle some of the water. We hope that the county will consider our R1 plan, or recycled water plan, so that we can potentially get a little bit more water infrastructure and water source in Central Maui. And we know that is sometimes the biggest obstacle. Water, we don't have a lot of water that we can spare. And so I think that is something that we really need to focus on if we want to get local families into homes. And so I think that will continually be the focus, both at the legislature and at the county, to see how we can get this to the finish line. So, I think for us, we see a lot of policy come to the legislature every single year, but I think at the end of the day, I always look at it and understand what is the trickle-down effect and how it's going to affect our home island of Maui. And so I think that's really exciting to me, because I think we just need the units in our community.
Absolutely. And, I've been talking with some other developers recently, and, as we've been looking at rebuilding Lahaina and looking at, other, needed development across Maui County, one of the things that came up several times in the last month was, again, connected with that project, the sewage treatment plant. And many were saying that there are other housing developments, that are in Central Maui, that if that sewage treatment plant was prioritized, would help other developments also move forward in that area, in or near that area. So that was something that people were talking about as just, the working with the county and the urgency to try and. So I love hearing this update, because they're saying, also if we can get that sewage treatment plant, there's other developments near there that could also happen in the housing arena and expand units.
Absolutely. I think infrastructure, the core infrastructure, is what a lot of times is holding many of the projects up. I think if you can, surprisingly, if you can get over the water aspect, then you get stopped by the wastewater, or vice versa. And I think that's really frustrating. And then the last thing is, then of course, then you have to have the project financially make sense. And a lot of times at this high interest rate environment, it just doesn't. And so I think you see a lot of good projects who goes along fairly far, and then they kind of stop. And, I think, because the pipeline for getting approvals is so long on Maui, I think, that a lot of times the economic conditions will shift, right? Especially over a 5-year period, you never know what's going to happen. And I think that's a little bit frustrating. I think we take a look at every single project. We work with the county, Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation, to kind of see, okay, what will it take to get some of these projects off the ground? And sometimes it does take a lot of subsidy, but I think we have to then weigh, okay, if we're going to give a subsidy to make this financially make sense, then how much is it going to cost? And these days it's been going up and up because of the high interest rate environment. But back to your point, I think the wastewater treatment plant, that needs to get done. Unfortunately, when we take a look at where it is in the development phase, it's in the EIS, the environmental study portion, and in theory, we're supposed to be able to get that done within the next year or so, and then the build-out won't happen until 2030. And so hopefully, what the hope is that when that begins to open up, hopefully at that point we're reaching the functional capacity of of what the Kahului plant, and we can then there will be no stopping. But I think that for some of the developers, they need some certainty that's going to happen, and so I think we're really hoping that the county will give some type of assurance that we're not going to use wastewater as the barrier to building future housing. And so same thing with water. I think water, there is limited amount. I think we're working with the State Water Commission to figure out, okay, what is the functional capacity of how much more that we can pump out of the Central Maui aquifers. And so we gave them some money this past session, and they're going to do a functional study to understand how much more water we can pump out of those aquifers. So, I think their assumption is we can pump a little bit more than what they're giving out now, but that's just a Band-Aid, right? And so that's supposed to then carry us over until we get a larger plan of where we're going to get additional water. I think when you talk to a lot of folks, I think recycled water is the next frontier. It's cheaper. And it's the same cost of developing a well. And I think there's other options that people are throwing out there, like desalination. I've heard from the mayor, but I think unfortunately, what a lot of people are used to is fairly cheap water. And once you start getting into things like desalination, it starts to get much more expensive. And so I think at a certain point, we as a community are going to have to decide, what is it that we're going to pay for things like water and sewer? And I think when you take a look at the city and county of Honolulu, who's really having that conversation about how much they're willing to pay for sewer prices, I think their city council had a huge fight over what those sewer prices were. And I think it led to reorg of their city council, in fact. So these are issues that are not easy to have because I think at the end of the day, people really know that working families are already pressured with the cost of living, and for us to then start to increase that cost of living is very, very difficult for elected officials. And so I think we're going to have to really think creatively and figure out what that balance is.
I wholeheartedly agree. And as you say, I have conversations every day, with businesses, and they're talking about their workers, and their workers are highly stressed in being able to afford to continue to live here. We've seen exodus to many of their mainland states. And it's a big challenge. And so many young people that I'm talking to these days are looking at housing prices and saying, look, just even for a nice home, they're talking over $1 million these days, and often 1.2, 1.5, as people are looking, and they're just getting so frustrated. So it's a critical time for us. And yes, I watched that city and county of Honolulu discussion on the news many nights. And it's a very challenging time. And yet infrastructure is going to be critical to our development. And I'm glad, though, that, like you're talking about, we've talked about R1 water for quite some time, but it's really an important discussion to continue to have and to look at how we can do it. Sometimes we're just constantly looking at obstacles, but it is an affordable way. And I think the desal conversation, I have no idea on the cost, but I know that there's a lot of new infrastructure that would be needed. So I think the cost, as you point out, is going to be very, very high in the beginning, and I'm wondering how that levels out, or if it levels out. But yeah, these are challenging times, and right now people are saying we can't, with what we're paying and in rent, and for people who have been able to afford what they're even looking at for mortgages right now. We're hoping to see the interest rates come down, but right now it's just we're just really in a crunch for what we could have done cheaper decades ago, but we're slow to do it, and we still have those permitting issues. Are you seeing more movement, Troy, on the permitting issues in Maui? In terms of as you're looking at other counties, in your role at the state legislature, how is Maui County doing? I know we had the wildfires and that exacerbated everything, but we're supposed to be streamlining those. Is there any lessons or movement that you think, looking at others permitting across the state, that we should be doing and expediting here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so there's a couple things to that. I think we every single year at the legislature, especially in the housing committee, we're talking about permitting. I think one of the things that we've been trying to tackle, at least on our side, which is the state side, is how long that a permit goes through the State Historic Preservation Division, because that has been a bottleneck. And so I think what we are going to experiment with, the governor just signed a bill, a series of bills actually on the State Historic Preservation Division. One, it loosens the definition of what type of review a property needs to go through if it's over 50 years old. And I think there was some opposition on us loosening that definition. But I think when you take a look at process, I think just too many permits were going to the State Historic Preservation Division, and it was just getting bogged down there. So people were waiting on that property, or that division for the property to get reviewed. And essentially, why this was happening was because these days, a lot of the homes are old, and so when you're trying to get a permit, anything over 50 years automatically went to the State Historic Preservation Division, despite it having no historical background, and it's just, it's just a house that's old, but yet they had to review it, and that took a lot of time. So we tightened up that law. There's going to be a little added provisions on criteria of what it will take to send it, or if it's over 50 years old. So that should help a little bit. I think we're going to start experimenting to see if State Historic Preservation Division can do some third-party review. I think in concept, it's an interesting piece of legislation. Our friend Rep. Miyake was really pushing that forward after stories that he heard in our district in Sand Hills of them getting stuck at SHPE for 3 or 4 years just for a residential permit. And so we're going to see if that can work. I think the hard part about third-party review is that there's just not enough archaeologists in general in Hawaii. And so if we start to do third-party reviewers for the permit, they're conflicted out from actually doing work on certain projects that, on the private side, that a lot of these people who live in, areas with sand will have to get these studies done, and it just limits the pool of people. And so we'll see. I think it's worth the pilot to understand what are the pitfalls and what are the upsides of doing a third-party reviewer. Of course, a lot of people will say, well, you're paying this third-party reviewer, so of course they're going to be in your favor, and it doesn't favor the state. But I think we're in a crisis at this point. I think we can't recruit archaeologists to work for the state, and we can't retain them. It's just very, very difficult. Even though we've been giving differentials, we've been really working on hiring recruitment. But I think in that space, we've been trying to make some progress, and as I said, we have assumptions that it'll get faster, but we have to test it. So we'll see. We just made different types of changes in the past couple of legislative sessions. We gave them a lot of positions, but they haven't been able to fill those positions. So it's one after the other of solutions that we think will work, but sometimes it just doesn't. But we'll keep at it on the state historic preservation side. The other thing that we did pass was we gave some money to a task force. It's gonna be chaired by my friend Rep. Gregor Iligan from the Big Island. He's the chair of economic development, and he's looking at permitting from an economic development perspective. But he really wants to see if we can speed up permitting. And so I have had some frank conversations, because I've been working in that space for many, many years, of that it's a pretty complicated process because each county does it differently. But I think we still have a commitment of trying to speed up permitting. And so I think we will see some progress through that task force to see what else we can throw on the table at the legislature from a statewide perspective that we can try and fix to speed up each county's individual permitting. I think it's still, I think there is some hiccups still yet. I think we're all very slow across the board. I think Honolulu, Maui, we have issues. I think Four Leaf has been helpful from what I understand. Well, their Four Leaf has been contracted by the county to help with the Lahaina permitting. But I think a lot of times we still get bogged down in certain departments, such as planning and water. Of course, SHPE was the notorious department, but I think we just have to work through those. And I think the county's facing the same issue that we're facing with SHPE is how do you recruit and retain really good employees who can review these permits? And that's been a challenge. And I think we have to all collectively figure out how do we fix that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I love that is going to be looked at. We're doing something looking at, for example, the state liquor law, which is one law, and we have challenges in Maui County on how that's applied, and we've been getting a lot of complaints lately. But when we started to look into it, and we looked at, how long the law was, which was, I'm sorry, I don't have that data in front of me, but over 70 pages. And then you looked at the county, and Maui County had the highest number of pages at over 150 pages that we've transmitted that law into, where another county in Hawaii has 38 pages and one has 72. And so it's like all over the board. So, this is, I think, another good example. And what's always floored me, the first year when I joined the chamber, which was back in 2006, we did a candidate endorsement process, which we do every election. And every candidate endorsement process since 2006 and beginning then, we would have elected officials come in from the county side and say they've visited other states. They've seen how people can do it anywhere from 2 months to a day, where mayors would convene groups and all the different departments would come together and they'd hammer out the issues. And we, back then people said, 2 months would be a godsend. 6 months we'd be thrilled. It was just like, and yet we've never progressed in that. So, here we are today, nearly 20 years later, still saying we've got some of the same issues. And now they're exacerbated by, worker shortages and other issues that we've got as well. So love that that's being looked at, and anything we can do to help, we're here to be a part of that, because it's such a critical issue and it's holding up everything from people's housing for their personal lives and for their sustaining their families to business issues, getting permits. And there's so many things being held up right now. So we're happy to support in any way we can. Let's start this issue, but we may get the station has a mandatory break in a couple minutes. But so this is kind of a meaty thing. But let's start talking a little bit about the Lahaina settlement and how exactly does the HECO bill help fire survivors, and help people understand, how is this tell us a little bit about this deal. Is it a fair deal for them, and how does it work for the ratepayers?
Yeah, so very good question. And it's a very complicated process. I think some people were reading about it in the news. It's interesting that because I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, I ended up in the middle of the negotiations. And so essentially, this past legislative session, we all agreed with the governor's pre-negotiated settlement with all the parties. And the only role that we had as a legislature was we had to put in our contribution to the Lahaina master settlement, which was around $800 million. And then you've heard of the other folks that have to put in, which is, Kamehameha Schools have to put in some money. I think almost the same amount as the state. HECO, Hawai'i Electric, is going to put the lion's share of about $2 billion. And then, of course, the total settlement totals up to around $4 billion. And that will then get divvied up by the courts depending on the severity of your damages and what you have to go through during the Lahaina fire. And so I think that was a big milestone for the legislature to set aside that $800 million, and we'll pay it over the course of a couple of years. And so it's not all one fiscal year, but I think that was a big milestone. I think because people were talking about it when we actually passed it, it wasn't covered heavily. But I think that was a really big deal because it finally put closure to that settlement. And so because we approved that, now Hawai'i Electric had to now pay their $2 billion. And so I think what Hawai'i Electric has been saying to us all along at the legislature is that they need some type of financial assistance, number one, to enhance their credit to be able to operate, because I think when you take a look at them being able to borrow money on the private market, essentially their credit rating is terrible, so they're getting really expensive rates. And so they've been coming to the legislature to ask for help to get them to help enhance their credit, and number two, essentially help them with extending a line of credit from the state that is inexpensive to help them harden and protect the grid from future wildfires.
For HECO with this $2 billion contribution, they're going to have to borrow some money, and to borrow some money, they need to raise some money because, they have to, in this high interest financing time, they have to enhance their credit. So you were just starting to say that they'd asked the legislature for help and to extend a line of credit from the state that was at a lower interest rate. Oh, Troy, are you there?
Can you hear me, Pam? Oh, yes.
Oh, I can now. Yes, thank you.
So the state essentially allowed what we're calling securitization to take place. And so essentially that is what we offered Hawai'i Electric, a $500 million line of credit from the state that they would then pay back over the course of 30 years by a small surcharge every single month on each utility customer's bill. And so that was the big debate of whether we should allow that, whether, it's again, cost of living, is it worth it? And so I think what we ended up doing was, because we also had to answer the other question of what the other part of the bill that HECO really wanted was to ensure that over the course of a specific period, they wanted a cap on liability if another wildfire occurred. And so this was essentially they needed this to show that credit agencies that there was some predictability in what would happen, right? And so I think we ended up with some predictability this time because the governor called everyone together and said, okay, you're going to pay this amount to settle this lawsuit. But I think when you take a look at the private markets, they really weren't sure, if we don't have anything on the books, if a future occurrence ever happens, we don't know who's going to be liable and for how much. And so HECO was asking for some type of certainty on how much that potentially would be if future occurrences would happen. And I think this it was an interesting ask, but I think what the legislature really wanted was for HECO to really reduce their risk. And so that's why we thought the securitization was really important, because they needed to make the investments to make sure that future catastrophes don't happen. A big part of it is, you've seen in the last couple of weeks, the power shut off when the high winds are occurring. That is a big part of them reducing risk. And so essentially what the legislature was debating was, what do we allow HECO to have? What's the timing? And so I think we couldn't really figure out what the correct formula was going to be. And so I think what we decided was, it was a little too complicated for the legislature to decide all the nuances. And so I think what we did was we set up a process to the Public Utilities Commission to answer a couple of questions. Number one, should Hawai'i Electric be able to get a cap on liability, and for how long, and what does that cover? Is it a time liability? Is it a per occurrence liability? Number two, how much of the $500 million should HECO be given based on their financials to make sure that they can do all the wildfire risk improvements over the course of a period of time, and what is going to be passed on to the consumers. And so those are the things, that's the framework that we set up, but at least there is some certainty for Hawai'i Electric. I think they at least have seen that their credit rating already has increased because we set this framework up. I think concurrently during the legislative session, we were comfortable with passing this out because, they spun off American Savings Bank, and so they got, the first payment, payment and a half to pay off the wildfire settlement. They also issued more stock, and so they're they're there with the payments. And I think with these bills that we just passed, I think they should be able to figure out how to pay the full $2 billion to complete the wildfire settlement funds. That was really important for us to get those final touches to make sure that our Lahaina survivors will get what they deserve. And so I think we're there. I think the PUC needs to do their work, but the Public Utilities Commission is used to this kind of work. They're the ones who dive in. They look at all the factors, the financial health of the various companies before issuing these type of decision and orders. And so I think we do have confidence that we will have a good outcome, at least in this situation.
I think that's a great outcome. And then, of course, with the PUC, they also have opportunities in their process for the public to ring in. And so then that allows, ratepayers to also have an opportunity as this moves forward to share their thoughts and also be further educated, as the PUC takes it up and the hearings are held. they'll learn more so that they can be, people have sometimes, knee-jerk reactions to, their perspective is based on what they know or how they feel. But it'll also give them a chance to hear the broader issues and the challenges that the PUC and HECO are weighing, as well as what consumers will be weighing. And I think that's a great outcome. I think that's a great process.
Yeah, and I think we really needed to stay focused on this issue because, at the end of the day, we could have let HECO go under or file bankruptcy, but I think what we really felt strongly at the legislature was we needed to have a locally managed utility, right? We didn't, although it's a publicly traded company, at least the management is right in Honolulu. You don't have to call someone in Florida or, someone, that's not in Hawaii. And so that was potentially at risk. And so I think that was the whole purpose of why we decided not to go with NextEra, right? We wanted to keep a locally managed utility. And so I think we kind of had that at the front of mind. I think we heard a lot of people who wanted to try and turn Hawaiian Electric into a co-op. And I think that, that's the Kauai model. Kauai has a co-op where it's locally owned and managed. But, I think that would likely work on Maui if we could figure that out with the right players, but it would not work on Oahu. And so lots of decisions, lots of balancing, but at the end of the day, you have to stay focused on what the priority was. And the priority, at least for me, was to make sure that they could pay that $2 billion to the victims. And, we need to make sure that that happens for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How is the federal government in Washington, D.C. helping or hurting Hawaii right now as we watch all the things that seem to change on a daily basis?
Pam, I think it's a little bit concerning for us in Hawaii because I think if the economy was doing a little better, we would be less concerned because we would have the ability to cover various federal restrictions or cuts. But we are, with the slowdown in tourism, we aren't looking forward to the next legislative session because with the compounding of the federal effects and just less tax revenue from just people with, I think it's as a result a little bit of the federal uncertainty and, foreign countries like, Canada, who is a big feeder to Hawaii or at least Maui, they're looking at what's going on. They're like, okay, we're just not going to go to America or Hawaii right now. And so it's definitely impacting what we're going to be able to do in the future. And I think we're very concerned. I think what really saved us this past legislative session, because I think right after we adjourned the session, there was the Council on Revenues meeting, and the projection was that revenues are down, and so our projections of what we passed were no longer accurate. But thank goodness that our Attorney General was working on the Plavix settlement case, and so we had an extra $500 million that dropped into our state budget that we could use as carryover. And so that essentially helped to balance the budget without the governor having to do a lot of vetoes. And so that was a big help. So we will start at least the budget next year at zero. If not, we would have to cut $500 million from the budget to get to that, starting point. And then from there, I think we'll have to see where tourism goes before we start the next legislative session. I think we're watching what the impacts are of the University of Hawaii and the Department of Education. There are, cuts there that are happening, but we're trying to challenge both of those departments to figure out if they can carry those programs or what strategic reductions can we make to those areas to kind of make sure services continue. The big reductions that we are concerned about is what will happen in the healthcare space, right? I think they were talking a lot about Medicaid space, of making that a little bit more stringent, potentially not covering portions of Medicaid expansion, which we do quite a bit here in Hawaii. And so that will be big impacts. I think we have to see when does those things go into effect. I think we were thankful that there was a provision of rural health centers or hospitals in the federal budget, thanks to our friends in Alaska who put that in. So at least we'll get some of that covered. But we are watching closely of what else will come down the pipeline because unfortunately it's not over yet. This was just a reconciliation bill, but they actually do have to pass the real budget soon. And so that could end up being more dramatic cuts in various places. And so it's not a good time from the federal government side because I think we've been kind of getting accustomed to a lot of federal aid, a lot of federal infusion, especially, during the Biden time, there was infusion for infrastructure dollars, for various miscellaneous programs that we would just try and pull down with the federal government. But these are changing times, and we have to recalibrate and just get a little bit more creative.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly what we need to do. We have to examine everything, get very creative, and plan out further, during these times of uncertainty, and look at new ways of doing things. So absolutely appreciate that. And a lot of our businesses are having to do the same thing, and they're struggling. And of course, many are so dependent on the visitor industry. Some more than others, but the impact is being felt by quite a few. Let's get to the other thing that we promised everybody, which is space. Tell us about the future of the Space Force and what that means for jobs and the economy here in Hawaii, and especially on Maui.
Yeah, so I think one of the most interesting things is I just took a quick site visit with Maui Economic Development Board, and they showed me the progress of what the new Space Force campus is looking like, and construction is quickly happening within the tech park. And so I think what we're really trying to figure out is to make sure that we're ready for this new facility to assist in the creation of ancillary businesses that will support the new presence of Space Force on Maui. And, Space Force has been here for a number of years, but I think now it's solidified with them building out this facility. The supercomputer will move from its current facility into this new facility. Of course, they will be supporting a lot of the technical uses of the telescope that they do have on Haleakala. And so I think we're feeling very bullish about what potentially this could mean for our community. But I think what we need to make sure is that we have all the right programs in place that will really help businesses to jumpstart and get ready. I think, the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation gave a grant to Maui Economic Development Board to help them with a business accelerator for those who are looking to take advantage of Space Force. And so that's an ongoing program that they're deploying right now. And MEDB also opened up a new kind of lab to help with these businesses really figure out what components that they need in the early years to make sure that we can support them. And so I think that it's very exciting. I think the other aspect of the tech park is that the county council gave a $25 million investment so that we can have workforce housing in that tech park. Because one of the biggest things is, if you want to create a business, a lot of people have been complaining that there is no workforce housing for people to live. And so I think we essentially tried to help get that going. And so in the next couple of years, you'll see some workforce housing coming up in the tech park. The Goodfellows have been at it for many, many years, and I'm thankful for them not giving up and believing in our community and in the future. So I think we're very bullish on all the aspects that are coming up in that area. And so I think there will be a transformation there, and I think we need to be ready for it. And I think we need to have all of those programs ready for people. It's going to be harder at the beginning, but if you don't have all that infrastructure in place, we're never going to get to the build out of what we need to have. And especially, I think there's a lot of conversations happening with the college, because the college will be very important to make sure that our local kids can stay and work in these fields, and they won't, continue to necessarily import people to these jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and it brings a whole new array of opportunities, and it's such an exciting program to have on Maui. And years ago, and it went away, and I'm not 100% sure why, but when in the early days, when Senator Inouye secured the supercomputing center, and I used to give tours out there, one of the things that was so unique, especially in a Department of Defense, Air Force, related mission and activity that was taking place, they had secured opportunities for private companies to be able to use the supercomputing capability that was segmented from some of the other work. And early on, we had a company called Synchromic Studios that was doing high-end commercials and animations and things that, took that level of power to do, which would be really helpful in the film industry as well. So I hope some of that becomes available again, because it was built into the original intent of the program.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, because I think there always is a community component, and it's about how do you leverage that community component to create a broader industry. And so yeah, we really need to take a look at what are the community components that we're going to get from this project. And you're right, really figure it out and leveraging.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Troy, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a treasure, as always, to have you on. And you're a treasure trove of information, and we greatly appreciate all these amazing updates.
Thank you so much, Pam. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. Aloha. All right, so now we're going to have Christian Galapon. He is a Maui-based business strategist, marketing systems expert, and co-founder of Tanaka Galapon Consultants, a firm that helps local entrepreneurs build scalable, compliant, and sustainable businesses with a background in operations, marketing, and public affairs. Christian has been helping launch businesses across Hawaii, specializing in streamlining systems, branding, and community-based development. He's actively involved in civic initiatives and leadership development with a vision for Maui's future rooted in economic diversification and cultural preservation. Christian, are you with us this morning?
I had to recall and we lost connection. So hang on.
Oh, okay. No worries. So we are excited to have Christian on. He has been we met him recently at our I'm trying to think of the event that we did, our BizMix event, and Christian has been a great help. Is Christian back on?
I think he is. Christian, are you there? Christian?
Hi, hello. Sorry about that.
Hi, hello, Christian. Great to have you on the show. I was just introducing you. So I know you started off in luxury retail sales. Tell us about how you went from doing that, from doing that world to the world of now consulting.
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me now? Or can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So you started off in luxury retail sales. So how did you go from that to moving into this world of consulting?
Okay, yeah. So just to kind of go off, I feel like I kind of fell into this world. I moved to Maui prior to COVID from Lanai for college. And I took up a part-time job at Tiffany & Co. And that's kind of where I started my career here on Maui, at least. But let me tell you, 3 months into me starting that job, my cousin had asked me if I could help him start his food truck. I was like, okay, what do you need? He's like, I don't know how to do my website. I don't know how to do my social media. I really need help with my health permit because, corresponding with the health sector has been difficult for a non-native English speaker. And so I was like, okay, I can help him. I got him open. I set up his POS, set up a website, set up social media, did his social media. Got him open with the health permit, and then, I helped him out while working part time at Tiffany & Co. Eventually, he made enough revenue to pursue a brick and mortar location. And so then he asked me again, hey, can you help me open? He's like, okay, yeah. Same process again, just for a different business. Get your wastewater, get your website going, get your social media. And I also coordinated a grand opening event. And I guess once I got that brick and mortar location going, he wanted me to help his friend. other people started, I guess, kind of hearing about what I did, and they started asking me if I could help them. So I started saying, yeah, sure, I can help you out. So that's how I kind of got into this world of consulting.
That's awesome. So tell me about how you're helping these businesses that you're working with build stronger foundations in operations, marketing, and one of the things I noted was even compliance.
Yeah, so one of the most difficult parts about starting a business, I found, especially here on Maui, is definitely permits and regulations. Especially someone who's never, especially entrepreneurs or business owners who's never been in that space before, it can seem a little daunting. And B, now with our current age, of technology, social media, the digital revolution, a lot of old methods of marketing that a lot of businesses are used to just, I wouldn't say obsolete, but aren't as optimal anymore to pursue, right? But for a lot of my clients, doing social media, getting a website up and running, doing search engine optimization, it can be incredibly confusing, overwhelming, for a first-time business owner. So the services that I provide is I come in and then I see what stage of starting a business they're in. If they're still in conception, or they have a concept, they have a menu, and they just need to secure a lease agreement, or they're ready to open, but they just can't. You just can't get through the health department for whatever reason. And so I sit down with them, I strategize, and I help build a strong foundation. That kind of alleviates the worry that a first-time entrepreneur has to go through when they're starting a business.
That's awesome because, yes, there's so many complexities when you're starting a business. We've got, I'm just getting a signal, we've got just a minute and a half. So tell everybody, Kristen, I'm going to have you come back on the show since we've had a little bit of a disconnect this morning, but tell everybody how they can get a hold of you to engage your services and help them get started and overcome some of the obstacles that they're facing right now.
Okay, yeah, so you can definitely reach out at my business number at 808-563-0480, text or call. Or you can also visit my website at tngconsulting.com.
Awesome. And then since we have just a little bit more time, can you give them a sense of one thing that they can do to help reduce? Oh, I guess we don't have time for that. I'm so sorry, Kristen. But we will bring Christian back on and ask him to join us again because he has so many exciting things that he's doing to help businesses. And so, Kristen, thank you for joining us. I know you're getting in your car and you've got someplace to be too. But we will bring him on again because he's been very involved in civic engagement and helping businesses and look at other new ways when many have focused on one economic driver, how to look at others. So thank you all for joining us this morning. It's been a lot of great information in a short period of time. We hope you enjoyed the show and hope you'll join in again next Tuesday for Business Matters. Blessings and aloha.